When I look back now, I realize how naive I was, thinking a fresh start meant simply moving houses. It was the spring after I left my job in Ohio, a place that had eaten up 5 years of my 20s without ever feeling like home. David, my boyfriend, was thrilled when I told him I was ready for something new. He was working construction off and on, and I'd been piecing together part-time shifts trying to keep things steady for our daughter Laya. She was only 2 years old, with those curious brown eyes that made me want to shield her from everything bad in the world. I told myself moving into a quieter neighborhood in Pittsburgh would give her that safety. The double house on Lincoln Avenue wasn't much to look at. Peeling paint, thin walls, windows that rattled in the wind. Still, the rent was cheap enough, and I convinced myself the rough edges gave it character. The left side was ours, the right side belonged to a couple in their 60s who mostly kept their curtains drawn. Beyond them lived Carl and Patty. He was broad-shouldered with a permanent scowl carved into his face, and she was wiry, with a voice like broken glass when she laughed. They waved when we first moved in, but even that felt more like a performance than a welcome. David brushed it off. "They're just private," he said, hauling another box inside. "Give it time." I wanted to believe him. The first weeks passed quietly enough. I spent my mornings cleaning, setting up Laya's small room and making the place feel like ours. Sometimes I caught Carl staring too long from his porch, cigarette dangling from his fingers. But I told myself I was imagining it. Patty would chat with neighbors out front, but the second I stepped outside, she clammed up like someone hit a switch. I chalked it up to small-town politics. Maybe I hadn't earned their trust yet. Then came the night I couldn't ignore it anymore. We had just put Laya to bed when I heard a sharp clack near the front door. David thought it was nothing, maybe the screen slamming in the wind, but when I looked the next morning, the paint around the lock was scratched, streaked with some blue-gray residue. Boot prints dotted the porch. Someone had tried to force their way in. "Kids," David muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. He screwed in an extra lock, but I felt eyes on us as he worked. When I turned, Carl was leaning against his railing, watching with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Something in my gut told me our troubles had just begun. The next week unraveled slowly, like a bad dream you can't quite shake. I'd walk through the house in the mornings and notice things weren't where I left them. A lamp tilted at a strange angle. Laya's toy blocks scattered across the living room when I swore I'd cleaned them up the night before. At first, I blamed exhaustion. Parenting a toddler can make you second-guess everything, but when I ran my hand over the window latch in the kitchen and felt it loose, broken in a way it hadn't been before, the truth hit me cold. Someone had been inside. I found a greasy smear on the doorknob, like oil, the kind of detail no stranger could explain away. My skin crawled. David tried to stay calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "We'll get cameras," he said. "Maybe it's nothing, but if it's something, we'll have proof." But before we even had the chance, I found something worse. I was tossing trash one afternoon when I spotted a washcloth sticking out of our bin. Wrapped inside was a metal rod, heavy and sharp at one end, almost like a homemade weapon. My stomach knotted. That night, curiosity, or maybe desperation, pulled me to check Carl and Patty's dumpster. Inside, under a bag of empty beer cans, I saw them, my things. A scarf I thought I lost, a t-shirt of David's, one of Laya's stuffed animals. I grabbed the bear with shaking hands and stuffed it into my jacket. When I told David, his face hardened. "That's it. We're confronting them." We marched next door that evening. Patty opened the door, chewing gum with her jaw working like a machine. Carl leaned back in a recliner, eyes on us like we were amusement. "You've been in our house," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And you've been taking our things. I want it to stop." Carl laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "Lady, you've lost your mind." Patty leaned against the frame. "Why would we want your junk?" "Because I found it in your trash," I snapped. The room went silent for a moment, then Carl leaned forward, his face shadowed. "Careful what you're saying. Accusing people can get you in trouble." The door slammed in our faces. That night, I called the police. The officer who showed up looked no older than 25, notebook in hand. I explained everything, showed him the stuffed animal. He nodded politely, but when I finished, he closed his book with a sigh. "Ma'am, without proof, like video or eyewitness, it's just neighbor disputes, we can't pursue it." I felt invisible, like I'd been screaming into a void. The sense of being watched grew unbearable. Every creak of the house made me jump. I caught myself checking the locks 3-4 times before bed, clutching Leia close when shadows shifted outside. David tried to keep a brave front, but I saw the fear etched into his face whenever he thought I wasn't looking. Then the men showed up. It was a Thursday evening, dusk settling low over the street. We were finishing dinner when headlights swept across the living room. A dark SUV idled outside, engine rumbling. My chest tightened. 3 men stepped out. One carried something that caught the porch light. It wasn't hard to recognize the shape of a gun. "Stay here," David whispered, grabbing his phone. I pulled Leia into my arms, her little body trembling as if she could feel the dread in my bones. The knock was more of a pound. Carl's voice carried through the walls, though I couldn't make out the words. David pressed 911, speaking low and fast, but before he could finish, a gunshot split the night. The sound exploded through the thin walls, echoing in my skull. Leia screamed. I nearly dropped her in panic. We bolted out the back door, sprinting, through the yard into the alley, hearts hammering. David's truck was parked 2 streets over. He'd insisted we avoid blocking the driveway. I'd never been more grateful for that quirk. We threw ourselves inside, and he peeled away as sirens began wailing in the distance. We didn't go back that night. We didn't go back at all. In the chaos of leaving, we discovered the final insult. As I packed what I could the next morning for my parents' house, I opened one of Leia's boxes. The smell hit me first. Acrid, chemical, bitter. Her clothes were damp, discolored, ruined. Weed killer. Someone had poured poison across her belongings, soaking into fabric meant for a toddler. I dropped the shirt in horror, gagging as the fumes clung to my skin. David stood beside me, his jaw tight. They wanted to hurt us. They wanted to hurt her. The thought made me sick. All those nights, all those times I brushed off my instincts, telling myself I was paranoid. I'd been right. Someone had been inside, watching, planning. And the worst part was how easily it could have been worse. One bottle of poison had already crossed a line I never thought I'd face. We filed reports. We handed everything to the police. But without hard evidence, without a video of Carl or Patty pouring that chemical or breaking in, the case went nowhere. We were just another family with a story too strange to prove. My parents urged us to stay with them until we could find another place. I didn't argue. For the first time in weeks, I slept without waking at every sound. But the safety came at a cost. I couldn't stop thinking about Lincoln Avenue, about the neighbors who had watched us every day, waiting for their moment, about the gunshot echoing through my ears, about the way no one, not the older couple, not the cops, had lifted a finger to help. We moved into a new apartment on the other side of town within a month. It wasn't perfect. The rent was higher, the space smaller, but it felt like ours. David installed cameras before we even unpacked. I double-checked the locks every night, a habit I couldn't shake. Leia adjusted quickly, her giggles filling, the rooms like sunlight breaking through clouds. But for me, the unease never fully left. I still dream about Lincoln Avenue, about Carl's smirk, about Patty's laugh, sharp and mocking, about the sound of that gun. Sometimes I wake drenched in sweat, convinced someone is standing outside the door. Life moves on, but scars remain. When people talk about neighbors, they imagine community, safety, a sense of belonging. I learned neighbors can also be predators, hiding behind walls too thin to block their malice. I don't know why they targeted us. Maybe we were just easy. Maybe they were bored. Maybe there was no reason at all. That's what haunts me most. The lack of answers, the reminder that evil doesn't always need explanation. What I do know is this: I'll never ignore my instincts again. because instincts are warnings, and sometimes they're all you have. Trust your instincts, especially when safety is at stake. Evil often hides in plain sight, and silence or disbelief from others doesn't make your fears less real. Protecting yourself and your loved ones isn't paranoia, it's survival. I used to think love meant compromise, but what I didn't realize was how easy it was to confuse compromise with surrender. I was 29 when I moved in with Lena. I'd been working as a mechanic since I was 19, the kind of job that leaves your hands permanently stained with grease no matter how much you scrub. Lena was different from anyone I'd dated before. Sharp, ambitious, and beautiful in a way that drew people in without her even trying. We met at a mutual friend's cookout. She laughed at one of my dumb jokes about carburetors. And before I knew it, we were dating. 2 years later, she wanted us to take the next step. "I found this place," she said one evening, shoving her phone into my hands. "A small townhouse newly painted just outside the city. It's perfect, fresh start, just us." I frowned at the address. It was nearly 40 minutes from my parents, farther still from the shop where I worked. "It's kind of out of the way, isn't it?" "That's the point," she insisted. "We don't need everyone breathing down our necks. We can build our own life without distractions." Her words carried weight. I'd always been close to my family, but she had a way of making me feel like I owed her, like choosing anything else meant I didn't take us seriously. So I signed the lease, boxed up my life, and followed her to that townhouse. The first month was fine, maybe even exciting. Lena decorated every corner with throw pillows and scented candles. She cooked elaborate dinners, leaving handwritten notes in my lunchbox. I thought I'd stumbled into the kind of stability I'd always wanted, but soon I started noticing things that didn't add up. She never let me answer the door when deliveries came, always rushing ahead of me with a nervous laugh. "You don't have to bother, I've got it," she'd say. At night, I'd sometimes wake to the creak of the back door and find her slipping outside. She'd come back smelling faintly of smoke, though she swore she quit years ago. I told myself it was harmless. Everyone has their secrets. But a small voice inside me whispered that I was missing something important, something sitting right in front of me if only I'd stop ignoring it. It was a Wednesday evening when suspicion really dug its claws in. I was under the kitchen sink, tightening a leaky pipe, when my flashlight caught a piece of paper shoved into the corner. I pulled it out. A receipt, wrinkled and damp. A motel not 2 miles from our house. Paid in cash. Lena's name scrawled across the signature line. I sat there on the cold tile, my heart hammering. Maybe she met a friend. Maybe she needed time away. The excuses felt hollow even as I made them. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I started watching more closely. I checked her phone when she showered, fingers shaking as I scrolled. Most messages were harmless, but buried between them were half-deleted threads from someone saved only as C. Fragments remained. "Meet me. Same place. Don't tell him." I felt sick. That night I asked her casually, "Hey, who's C? Someone from work?" Her eyes flicked to me, quick as lightning, then softened into a practiced smile. "Why? Are you snooping?" "I just noticed you don't trust me," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut. "This is what you do? Dig through my phone? God, Marcus, you're paranoid," I stammered, caught off guard. I wanted to ask," she stormed off, slamming the bedroom door. I sat alone on the couch, the motel receipt burning a hole in my pocket. For days after, she acted wounded, sighing dramatically, muttering under her breath about being smothered. Somehow the whole thing flipped on me. I began to wonder if maybe I was the problem, if maybe I was losing my grip. Then the boot prints appeared. Rain had turned the backyard into mud, and when I stepped outside one Saturday morning, I noticed them, deep boot prints pressed into the earth near the back door. They weren't mine. David, the guy from the shop, wore sneakers most days, and Lena, she didn't even own boots. The prints led straight to the shed. The lock was snapped, though metal bent out of shape. My stomach churned as I pulled it open. Inside, I found a mess that wasn't mine. Empty beer cans scattered across the floor, cigarette butts, a shirt draped over a box with lipstick smeared across the collar. My jacket, missing for weeks, hung from a nail. I brought Lena out there, anger boiling over. "Explain this." She crossed her arms, her face unreadable. "My stuff is in here. Someone's been in our shed, and look at this." I shoved the shirt at her, the stain bright against the fabric. For a moment she said nothing. Then her eyes met mine, cold and steady. "Fine. You want the truth? I've been seeing someone. Happy now?" The words gutted me. I staggered back, gripping the doorframe. "Who?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Does it matter? You were never enough, Marcus. Not exciting enough. Not enough." Her calmness was worse than shouting. She didn't even look guilty, just tired, like she'd rehearsed. This ending 100 times already. I should have walked away then. Packed a bag, left the key on the counter. But part of me needed answers. Part of me needed to understand how 2 years could unravel so easily. That mistake almost cost me everything. It happened 3 nights later. I was watching TV. The sound, Lo Solaya, no, so, we. I caught myself, so I wouldn't pretend this was still a family. So Lena could sleep upstairs. A pounding at the door shook the house. I opened it without thinking. A man stood there taller than me, broad-shouldered. Eyes bloodshot, he reeked of whiskey. "Where's Lena?" he growled. "She's asleep. Who the hell are you?" "I'm the one she belongs to," he slurred, shoving past me. Before I could react, Lena appeared at the top of the stairs. She didn't scream. She didn't ask what was happening. She just stared, her face pale but calm, like she'd been expecting him. "Come on, baby," the man said, reaching for her. "Let's go." I stepped between them. "Get the hell out." His fist came fast, catching my jaw, sending me sprawling. Pain exploded across my face. I tried to get up, but he kicked me hard in the ribs. "Stop," I shouted, gasping for air. But Lena didn't move. She didn't call the police. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there watching as I bled on the floor. When the man finally stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled, I looked up at her. "Why?" I croaked. She tilted her head, eyes empty. "You shouldn't have pushed." Those words haunted me more than the beating. I left 2 days later. My jaw bruised, my ribs aching, my heart hollow. I didn't take much, just a duffel bag of clothes and the photo of me and my brother fishing when we were kids. The rest, I left behind. Lena didn't try to stop me. She didn't beg, didn't cry. She just watched me pack, silent as a statue, her eyes following me like a shadow I couldn't shake. I crashed on my buddy's couch for a while, trying to piece myself back together. At night, I'd see her face when I closed my eyes. Not the laughing girl from the cookout. Not the woman who made me dinner with candles flickering on the table, but the one at the top of the stairs staring down at me as if she'd orchestrated everything. I don't know if she planned it. I don't know if that man was part of her life before me, during me, or after me. All I know is she let it happen. She chose silence over me. And silence can cut deeper than any blade. Sometimes I drive past that townhouse. The lights are on, curtains drawn tight. I don't stop. I don't want answers anymore. Some truths are too sharp to hold. I'm learning to trust myself again, to believe that love doesn't mean giving up everything that makes you whole, because when you surrender all of yourself to someone else, you risk losing more than your pride. You risk losing your soul. Love without honesty is just manipulation dressed as devotion. When someone isolates you, twists your doubts into guilt, and watches you suffer without lifting a hand, that isn't love, it's control. Trust your instincts, value your self-worth, and never let the illusion of companionship cost you your safety or your peace. I never thought I'd fall that fast, or at least I didn't think it would happen to someone like me. I was a graduate student who had learned early how to protect myself from disappointment. Most nights, I could be found in the campus cafe, headphones in, quietly reading or typing up papers, pretending the world outside my little bubble didn't exist. I wasn't lonely exactly. I had friends, classmates, and acquaintances, but I had grown used to keeping people at arm's length. Routine was safe, predictable, controllable. And then I met Naomi. It started with a spilled coffee, a classic cliché that somehow felt less like fiction and more like fate. I had reached for a sugar packet and bumped into her elbow, sending a cascade of coffee across the table. She laughed, not a polite laugh, but the kind that made me feel seen in a way I wasn't used to. "Careful," she said, brushing the incident off. Her voice carried warmth and confidence, like she was untouchable yet inviting at the same time. Conversation followed naturally, spilling into topics of books, professors, and dreams I had never spoken aloud. By the end of the week, I found myself looking for her at the cafe, craving her presence. Before I knew it, she was part of my daily life. Dinners became routine. Late-night walks across campus turned into whispered confessions, and laughter that had once been solitary became a shared sound. Within months, she brought up moving in. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but the excitement in her eyes made my stomach twist. "I can help with rent," she said, matter of fact. "It'll be easier and we can spend more time together. You'll love it." I hesitated. My small off-campus house was my sanctuary, each shelf and drawer arranged meticulously. Giving that up felt reckless. But the pull of her presence, the ease with which she made me feel alive, made me nod. The first few weeks were blissful. She filled the house with energy, laughter bouncing off the walls, late-night talks about music, movies, and shared ambitions. Life felt fuller than it had in years, and for a while I let my guard down completely. Then came the cracks. Naomi began locking her laptop when I entered the room. Her phone lit up during the night, quickly, hidden under her pillow. Arguments flared over minor things, her tone icy when I asked simple questions. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking, but unease gnawed at me. And then there was the jacket, strange, unfamiliar, tossed carelessly on my couch, with 2 wine glasses in the sink. "A friend stopped by," she said, laughing in a way that felt mocking, but it didn't feel like a joke to me. The first seed of fear had been planted, and I didn't yet realize it would grow into a shadow that would follow me far beyond that small house. The next week was worse. I woke to the sound of the front door slamming, the wind carrying a faint echo of someone running down the street. I rushed to the window but saw only shadows, nothing tangible. When I asked Naomi about it, she offered icy silence and then deflection, brushing off my questions like I was overreacting. I wanted to believe in her honesty, to cling to the life we had built together, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Things escalated quickly. Screenshots began appearing on my phone from an anonymous number. Photos of Naomi with another man, taken inside my house while I was in class. My chest tightened as I stared at the images, each one more shocking than the last. The man was close to her, arms around her shoulders, laughing in a way that belonged in our home, my home. When I confronted Naomi, the coldness in her eyes stunned me. "You were too easy to replace," she said casually, like it was a matter of fact, not cruelty. That shrug, that tone, cut deeper than any physical strike could. I threw her out that night. The adrenaline surged through me, my hands shaking, my mind racing with disbelief and fear. But the harassment didn't stop. Images kept coming, each new one a reminder of my betrayal, each new message designed to unnerve me. I blocked numbers, changed passwords, triple-checked locks, but the paranoia lingered. Every passing stranger on the street made my stomach twist. Every unexpected knock made my heart hammer. Even my own home, once a sanctuary, felt like a stage for humiliation. I began to notice changes in myself. Sleep became elusive. I checked windows and doors obsessively. Every sound outside, every passing car felt like a threat. The energy I once felt around campus turned into tension, as if everyone could see the fear I carried inside. Even casual glances from friends set me on edge. I had fallen into Naomi's trap without realizing it, and now, months later, the fallout continued. I realized then that trust once broken, doesn't rebuild itself overnight. What I had thought was love had been an illusion, carefully crafted to manipulate and unsettle me. It wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was a violation of boundaries, a reminder that people can hide danger beneath charm and wit. The lesson hit hard. Vigilance was no longer optional. It was survival. Life after Naomi became a study in caution. I moved out of that house, taking only what I could carry and leaving memories behind that stung like open wounds. The campus cafe still smelled of coffee and books, but it no longer held the comfort it once did. I avoided her favorite spots, ignored the notifications that could have been traps, and rebuilt my routines carefully. I started therapy, partly because my friends insisted, partly because I couldn't shake the anxiety that had rooted itself in me. I spoke openly about fear, betrayal, and the sense of being watched. My therapist asked me to describe the moments I felt unsafe, to separate paranoia from reality. Doing so helped me understand the extent of the trauma I hadn't admitted even to myself. It wasn't just a failed relationship. It was a breach of my personal space, a lesson in digital vulnerability. Work became my anchor. I immersed myself in research, lectures, and student advising. Every interaction was measured, polite, cautious, but always controlled. Slowly, the tension ebbed. I could leave my apartment without checking over my shoulder every 3 steps. I could laugh again without thinking it would be used against me, but the memory of Naomi lingered like a shadow I couldn't fully shake. One evening, a classmate mentioned a recent case of online harassment and my stomach sank. I realized the cycle Naomi had started wasn't unique. People like her existed everywhere, exploiting trust, charm, and access. The fear wasn't just about one person anymore. It was about the vulnerability we all carried when we allowed someone into our private lives. Months later, I began tentatively exploring the idea of dating again, though I approached it like walking on a tightrope. I met people at social gatherings, through classmates, and cautiously online. Conversations were slow, deliberate, and I always maintained control. Every new acquaintance had boundaries, clearly communicated, and every red flag was scrutinized, without mercy. Occasionally, Naomi's memory surfaced, unbidden, triggered by a smile, a phrase, or even a familiar jacket left on a chair. I reminded myself I had survived, that the fear was valid but not permanent. Each encounter, each moment of connection, became a test of balance, trust, without naivety. I learned the hard way that charm alone wasn't enough to judge character, that actions mattered far more than words. Even the simplest interactions carried a weight I hadn't felt before. A friendly hug, a shared joke, or a casual visit to a friend's apartment required internal calculations. It was exhausting, but necessary. My caution wasn't paranoia. It was armor forged from experience, a lesson learned in the most painful way. Years later, I crossed paths with Naomi in a crowded cafe, her presence immediately recognizable. My heart raced. But this time, I didn't panic. I had a husband beside me, Darren, who knew my history and supported me completely. Naomi noticed me, her expression faltering briefly, then smoothing into indifference. She left without a word. I felt neither triumph nor fear, only cold detachment. The lesson had been learned, deeply and irrevocably. Looking back, I understood that love, desire, and vulnerability carry risk. Not everyone we invite into our lives is safe, and even the people who seem perfect can harbor manipulation. My caution, once a burden, had become my shield. I still hoped for connection, still wanted to be seen, but now I balanced hope with wisdom. Trust your instincts, protect your boundaries, and never let charm replace judgment. Safety isn't optional, and self-respect is indispensable. Love is precious, but your peace of mind is priceless. I didn't think I was the kind of guy who would lose himself in a relationship. I'd always been careful, the type to measure affection and distance in equal parts, to make sure my independence didn't slip through my fingers. But then Marissa came into my life, and it felt like a hurricane of energy I hadn't realized I'd been waiting for. She was loud, vivacious, and ridiculously affectionate in a way that made you forget your own boundaries. From the moment we met at that campus coffee shop, I was hooked. She laughed at my stupid jokes, teased me mercilessly, and somehow had a way of making even the most ordinary moments feel cinematic. We started dating casually at first. Late-night coffee runs, weekend hikes, movie nights at her place or mine. Everything was fun, easy, and intoxicating. I told myself it wasn't too fast because we were compatible, maybe too compatible. I started spending more time with her, letting my own routines bend around her schedule. By the time we had been together 6 months, we decided to move in together. It seemed natural. It seemed like the next step in a story I wanted to believe in. The first month was bliss. Our apartment was small, the kind where the kitchen and living room merged into one open space. But Marissa filled it with laughter, music, constant chatter, and a presence that was hard to ignore. I loved it at first, the warmth, the attention, but slowly, I began to feel a sense of suffocation I hadn't expected. She was always there, lingering in the corners of rooms, asking questions about where I was going, who I was talking to, even small details about work. At first, I laughed it off. "You're just protective," I told myself. Then the habit started. The constant texts asking where I was, the demand to share my phone password just in case, the little notes left in my backpack with reminders about her feelings. I began to notice her showing up at my office unannounced, claiming it was a surprise. Everyone else seemed oblivious to her presence, but I could feel the eyes on me, the intrusion into my day-to-day life. I tried subtle confrontations. "Marissa, I need some space," I said one afternoon. She laughed, brushing my concern aside. "I'm just making sure our relationship stays strong. You can't hide from me." I forced a smile, but unease began to creep in. At night, when I went out with friends, I started noticing a car parked across the street, headlights cutting through the dark. I didn't want to believe it at first, thinking maybe it was coincidence. But after weeks of this pattern, I realized she was waiting, watching, tracking my movements. Every time I brought it up, she framed it as love or care, insisting she was protecting us from problems before they started. Her presence, which had once been comforting, now felt like a cage. The first chapter of our life together ended with small cracks, the ones you ignore at first, thinking they're temporary, thinking love can bend and accommodate anything. I didn't yet know how far the control would go, how much of my personal life she would infiltrate. The warmth had turned cold, and the line between affection and obsession blurred more with each passing day. It didn't take long before the intrusions expanded. I started noticing subtle changes in my own behavior, ways I had adapted without realizing it. My social media accounts, once casual and harmless, began to feel like mine in name only. Messages from female friends would disappear, comments deleted, accounts logged in without my knowledge. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd left my computer open, maybe I hadn't logged out properly. But then I saw her reflection in the computer screen one evening, standing behind me, smiling as if she had caught me in some private moment. I tried confronting her gently. "Marissa, did you—" She cut me off, eyes sharp and playful, as if I were being ridiculous. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't hiding anything. You wouldn't understand, I'm protecting what we have." Her words, intended to reassure, only tightened the coil of fear in my chest. Every password, every private conversation, every small space in my life suddenly felt like hers to oversee. Then came the unannounced visits. I had dinner plans with friends one Friday night and stepped outside for a cigarette, only to find her. Car parked across the street, engine off, lights dimmed. I felt my stomach drop. I confronted her the next day. "Marissa, why were you outside the bar?" She shrugged, eyes wide. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. Isn't that what love is?" I wanted to scream, to tell her that love isn't about surveillance, but my voice caught in my throat. The patterns grew bolder. She would log into my laptop, delete emails, even remove friends from social media she didn't know. I began changing passwords constantly, hiding accounts, but every new attempt felt like a losing battle. Even when I was out of town visiting my parents, she appeared uninvited, claiming she just wanted to check on me. That night, I discovered her standing outside my parents' bedroom door, silent, listening. My mother called out furious, "Marissa, get out of here!" But her calm, smiling demeanor made the moment surreal, almost cinematic. It was clear she wasn't going anywhere until I acted. The first time I considered leaving her permanently, I realized how much she had infiltrated my life. My routines, my friendships, my sense of security, all had been compromised. It wasn't just love or attachment anymore. It was control. The feeling of being watched, of never being truly alone, was suffocating. My sanctuary, my home, my mind, all felt like hers to command. The confrontation was long overdue. I decided that weekend I would draw a line. I told her finally, with hands shaking and voice firm, that this had to end. "Marissa, I can't do this anymore. You've crossed boundaries. You've stalked me, my friends, my family. It stops now." Her reaction was almost predictable. A flash of anger followed by tears, then a sudden transformation into a victim of my alleged mistrust. "I only wanted to love you," she whispered, voice soft, trembling. "You're overreacting." But the situation was beyond discussion. She refused to leave. She sat in the driveway, blasting music, texting hundreds of messages, sending screenshots of my private accounts, each designed to unsettle me further. I called the police once, but she was careful enough to avoid illegal entry. It was harassment, without physical intrusion, a relentless psychological siege that made every hour unbearable. Friends tried to offer advice. But how do you explain someone watching your every move? Someone who refuses to respect the boundaries of a relationship? I began documenting everything. Screenshots, timestamps, recordings. Every attempt to rebuild my sense of normalcy required vigilance, calculation, and sometimes outright avoidance of social situations. I felt trapped in a web she had spun, and the threads were in every corner of my life. Even after she moved out, the paranoia didn't end. Her car would appear on nearby streets, a silhouette in the distance. Sometimes she would drive slowly past my apartment at night. My heart would pound, adrenaline surging as I locked every door, turned on every light. I realized then that the fear wasn't just in the moment. It had embedded itself in my psyche, lingering in shadows, in quiet moments, in the sense that my privacy could never fully be mine again. Recovery required boundaries and vigilance. I changed locks, phone numbers, and email accounts. I installed security cameras, spoke candidly with friends and family about the risks, and avoided casual disclosure of my whereabouts. Social interactions became calculated. Every outing, every conversation carried a mental checklist. Is it safe? Will she find out? Could she appear unexpectedly? Therapy helped, but not in a way that erased fear entirely. It helped me process the trauma, recognize patterns, and reclaim small pieces of independence. I realized the danger wasn't just in her actions. It was in the way she manipulated my perception of normalcy, in the way charm was weaponized to disarm caution. Love had been a trap, and I had walked in willingly. Now, I had to relearn trust, carefully, methodically, without blind leaps. Every encounter with strangers carried caution. Every new relationship required clearly communicated boundaries. Even in casual friendships, I observed subtle red flags I might once have ignored. My vigilance became armor, built from experience, reinforced by the knowledge of how easily charm can mask control. Time passed, and I rebuilt a life cautiously, slowly, like repairing a house after structural damage. I could leave my apartment without panic, laugh at jokes without second-guessing, and even meet people without immediate suspicion. But occasionally, when I caught a glimpse of a car parked a little too long, or a stranger lingering near my building, a shiver ran down my spine. Eventually, I met someone who respected boundaries, who understood past traumas without judgment. I allowed myself to hope again, but always with care. My experience with Marissa had taught me the hard lesson. Charm does not equal trust. And love does not justify control. Independence, boundaries, and vigilance are not optional. They are essential. Protect your space, your privacy, and your sanity. Recognize the difference between affection and control. Love should never feel like surveillance, obsession, or suffocation. True connection requires mutual respect, not domination, and your peace of mind is always worth prioritizing, above all else. I never thought moving in with someone would feel like stepping off a cliff. At 25, I'd finally carved out some stability for myself. Steady job at a warehouse, decent apartment, weekend shifts that left me evenings to myself. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was predictable. That predictability ended the day Kira convinced me to move in with her. She had this way of smiling that made you feel like the world itself tilted in your favor. "Ethan, it'll save us money. We can be together all the time," she said, eyes sparkling with the kind of excitement I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to believe her. The thought of seeing her every morning, cooking breakfast together, maybe even binge-watching shows curled up on the couch. How could I resist? At first, it was perfect. The apartment was tiny but charming, with sunlight spilling into the living room and just enough space for our combined lives. Kira made it feel like home immediately. She cooked, she laughed, she made everything feel effortless. She posted pictures on her social media, us smiling on the couch, captioned, "Home is wherever he is." I felt lucky, grateful, maybe even dumb for waiting so long to let someone in, but little things started nagging at me. Nights she said she was working late, and yet her hair was freshly styled when she came back. Her phone always seemed to buzz at strange times, messages popping up from names I didn't know. "Just friends from work," she'd say, voice smooth, eyes avoiding mine. I wanted to believe her, but something inside me wouldn't stop whispering that it wasn't true. The first really strange night was quiet, the city humming below our window. I woke up to find the apartment door unlocked. Kira was gone. My stomach sank. Hours passed. Then she returned, smelling faintly of cologne I didn't recognize, claiming she'd gone for a late walk. Something about the way she smiled, too casual, too easy, made my heart beat faster, not with excitement, but with unease. It was subtle at first, the extra texts, the little excuses. But then came the argument I overheard outside our window between her and some man, the words cutting through the night air. "You made promises. You can't back out now." I felt my chest tighten. Whatever world I thought we were building together, it wasn't real. And I didn't yet understand how deep the lie went. The following days were worse. I couldn't ignore the slashed tires, the threatening notes shoved under our door. Kira unnervingly insisted she knew nothing, but it wasn't fear in her eyes. It was calm, almost detached. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was someone else entirely. Maybe it wasn't connected to her, but every instinct I had screamed otherwise. I started watching her, noting her movements. The way she held her phone close, the way her laugh sounded rehearsed sometimes. "Ethan, you're being paranoid," she said one night, brushing my hand away as I reached for hers on the couch. Her touch felt cold, and I realized I wasn't imagining the tension between us. I had been lulled into a false sense of comfort by her charm, by the routine I wanted so badly to believe in. One evening I came home early, pretending I'd been called into overtime. The apartment smelled faintly of perfume, like a ghost trailing behind her. And then I saw him, the man from the argument outside. Kira was laughing with him on the couch, close, too close. I froze, chest tight, mind scrambling. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she said, her voice calm, almost teasing. My hands shook as the reality crashed over me. I had trusted her. I had let myself feel safe, and she had been living a life I wasn't part of, a life full of lies and hidden promises. The betrayal hit like a punch in the gut, leaving me gasping for air in a room that suddenly felt suffocating. I left that night, packed a bag without speaking, walked out into the cold streets, my chest aching. The city felt alien, the lights harsher than usual, shadows stretching long across the pavement. I wandered for hours trying to process it. The memory of her smirk haunted me, that unsettling calmness that made the betrayal sting even more. Friends noticed the change in me. My phone buzzed with concerned texts. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to explain how someone I trusted could manipulate every day, every word, every small gesture, while hiding a life entirely separate from mine. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of empty apartments, whispered threats, and the shadow of him lurking in corners I couldn't see. Work became my refuge, but even there, my mind replayed the apartment, her face, the casual cruelty in her grin. I found myself scanning crowds, noticing patterns, questioning motives. Paranoia seeped in, subtle but persistent, leaving me exhausted. Yet despite the pain, I recognized a lesson. I couldn't ignore the warning signs. I couldn't silence that inner voice that had been trying to tell me something all along. Weeks passed. I moved into a small studio alone, cheap rent, no frills. I focused on myself. Shifts at the warehouse, nights jogging to clear my mind, learning to cook simple meals. Kira became a ghost, a cautionary tale I whispered to myself in quiet moments. Then came the day I saw her picture online, laughing at some event, the same smirk on her face. My stomach twisted. It was unfair, but I realized something vital. Her life was her choice. I couldn't change it, and she had no obligation to me beyond what I'd allowed myself to hope for. My control was over my own choices, my own life. That clarity, painful as it was, became my lifeline. Months later, I met someone new, slowly, cautiously. The betrayal had left scars, but I learned to recognize the difference between intuition and paranoia. I didn't rush into trust. I didn't ignore the quiet alarms my instincts raised. Every relationship after that carried a new awareness, a balance between hope and vigilance, love and self-preservation. Some nights, I still think about Kira. The betrayal, the cold grin, the way trust can be weaponized. But I also think about how much stronger I am for having endured it, how much wiser, how much more attuned to the truth beneath appearances. Life moves on. Pain fades into lessons. And I know now that the most important relationship we have is the one with ourselves, our judgment, our instincts, our worth. Trust, I learned, is precious and fragile, and it should never be given blindly. Trust your instincts, value yourself above illusions of perfection, and never ignore the quiet warnings that protect you from those who would harm you emotionally. Betrayal teaches resilience, self-respect, and the importance of discerning genuine love from deception. I used to think that when things got rough in the city, traffic, deadlines, bills stacked on the counter, the only solution was escape. Lila thought the same, or at least she said she did. That's why we rented the cabin on Ashford Lake. It was small, just 2 bedrooms, a porch that sagged in the middle and a dock that creaked when you stepped on it. But it was ours for the summer, and for a little while I believed it would save us. Lila and I had been together for almost 3 years. We'd met at a work party, she in a red dress that didn't belong in that fluorescent-lit office building. Me too nervous to believe she was really interested when she laughed at my jokes. We started fast, weekends blending together, late, nights in bars and longer ones in bed. But time wears at everything. By year 2, we were arguing more than laughing, circling the same fights. She said I didn't take risks. I said she didn't know when to slow down. So when she suggested the cabin, I jumped at it. A clean break from the noise, a chance to remember why we liked each other in the first place. The first week felt like proof we'd made the right choice. We grilled burgers on the porch, played cards by lantern light, even swam in the lake, like kids until our lips turned blue. I caught myself thinking maybe this will work. Maybe we just needed space. But then the call started. "Work," she said, holding her phone tight to her chest, stepping out onto the dock or into the woods. Her voice dropped low, too low for me to hear. I told myself it was fine. Her job in marketing was demanding, and she'd warned me she couldn't totally disconnect. But after the 3rd or 4th time, I noticed she was gone longer than she should have been. When she came back, her cheeks flushed, not with stress but with something else, something lighter. One evening I went out to collect wood for the fire pit. The air was still, the sun a flat orange coin sinking behind the trees. Across the lake, maybe 50 yards away, I saw her. Not on the dock, not on her phone, but sitting with a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray hoodie. They were laughing, leaning close, their hands brushing on the bench like it was nothing. I stood there for a long time, wood forgotten in my arms, my chest tightening. When she came back later, I asked, "Who were you talking to?" She blinked at me, wide-eyed like I'd accused her of something ridiculous. "What are you talking about?" "I saw you, across the lake with some guy." Her mouth twitched into a smirk. "Ryan, you've been cooped up too long. You're imagining things." "I know what I saw." "Then maybe you saw some neighbor, I don't know. Don't start turning this into one of your paranoid fits." Her voice was calm, almost bored, but her eyes glittered in the fading light. I let it drop. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't want to fight. Not yet. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling fan creaking overhead, wondering if the whole summer had been a mistake. The noises started 3 nights later. At first it was just the dock. A heavy footstep, a groan of wood, then silence. I told myself it was raccoons or maybe a fisherman tying off his boat, but when I went out with the flashlight, the dock was empty. The next night I heard it again, this time closer, right outside, the bedroom window. A shuffle of shoes in the dirt, a hushed whisper I couldn't make out. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, but when I pulled back the curtain, the yard was still. The lake stretched out black and quiet under the moon. The following morning, I found 3 cigarette butts on the porch steps, Marlboro Reds. I don't smoke. Lila doesn't either, but I remembered the man across the lake, his hand resting too long on hers, the faint glow of a cigarette between his fingers. I showed them to her. "Explain this." She didn't even look at them. "You're getting worked up over garbage. Someone probably came by when we were out. 3 nights in a row. Right outside the window," she rolled her eyes. "Maybe it's kids messing around. Jesus, Ryan, not everything's a conspiracy." Her dismissal stung more than the butts themselves. I wanted her to care, to at least act unsettled. Instead, she brushed past me, picked up her phone, and said she had to take another call. Later that day, I walked the shoreline, checking to see who else might be staying nearby. Most of the cabins were empty or shuttered. Summer was fading, and Ashford wasn't the tourist spot it used to be. I saw him, though, the man in the gray hoodie. He was on his dock, smoking, his gaze lifting toward me like he'd been waiting. He didn't wave. He just stared, long enough to make my skin crawl. When I told Lila about it, she laughed. "What, you think I'm sneaking around with some random guy across the lake? You sound insane." "You were with him. I saw you. You saw what you wanted to see." "Honestly, Ryan, this is why we can't have nice things. You ruin it with your suspicions." Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I went to bed early that night, back turned to her, but sleep never came. Every creak of the dock, every sigh of the wind, I imagined him out there watching, waiting. The breaking point came on a Thursday. I'd gone into town for groceries, milk, bread, a 6-pack. The store was quiet, the kind of place where cashiers still make small talk, but I couldn't focus on anything they said. All I could think about was the look on that man's face, the way Lila had smiled at him. I drove back faster than usual, gravel spitting from under the tires as I turned into the cabin's drive. The screen door was half open, swinging in the breeze. At first I thought nothing of it, we were careless sometimes. But as I stepped inside, the sound hit me. Laughter, hers, and his. The living room was dim, curtains drawn against the sun. And there they were on the couch, her hand on his cheek, his lips pressed to hers. My groceries slid from my arms, a bottle smashing on the floor. They didn't even flinch. "Unbelievable," I said, my voice cracking. Lila pulled back, wiping her mouth like it was nothing. "Ryan, it's not what it looks like." I laughed, bitter and sharp. You've got to be kidding me. The man stood, taller than I'd realized, his shoulders filling the doorway. He didn't speak, just stared, as if daring me to move closer. Get out, I said, though my voice was weaker than I wanted. Ryan, Lila began, but I cut her off. No. You knew I'd come back. You wanted me to see this. She tilted her head, lips curling. Maybe I did. I couldn't breathe. The air in the cabin was too thick, the smell of cigarettes and her perfume twisting together until I thought I'd choke. I stormed out, slamming the door so hard the porch rattled. For hours I walked the shoreline, trying to calm the fire in my chest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, her hands on him, her smirk when I caught them. That night, when I finally returned, the cabin was quiet, too quiet. She was asleep or pretending to be. I sat on the porch until dawn, watching the lake, wondering what I'd do next. The boat came 2 nights later. It was past midnight, the lake black and still, when I heard the low hum of an engine. I sat up in bed listening. It grew louder, closer, then cut out. Silence. A moment later, the engine roared back to life. Headlights swept across the cabin, white beams flooding the windows. I rushed to the porch. Out on the water, a small motorboat circled, weaving slow patterns, its lights flashing like signals. My stomach dropped. Behind the wheel, I saw the man. Next to him, Lila. Her hair whipped in the wind, her face turned toward me. She was smiling. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted, though my words were swallowed by the night. The boat kept circling, closer each time. The engine cut in and out, the lights flashing against the cabin walls. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. I backed inside, locked the door, and grabbed the bat I'd left by the couch. For an hour I stood there, heart pounding, until the sound of the engine faded. When I finally dared to look again, the lake was empty. In the morning, Lila acted as if nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, humming softly, sliding a mug toward me. "Rough night?" she asked, eyes wide with innocence. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all I could do was stare at her, wondering who she really was. I left at dawn. I didn't pack much, just my clothes, my wallet, the things that mattered. The rest I left behind. She didn't try to stop me. She just stood on the porch, the man beside her, both of them watching as I loaded the car. "Ryan," she called, her voice light, almost playful. "Don't be so dramatic." I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just gripped the wheel and drove until the lake was a blur in the rearview mirror, but I can't forget it. The image of her on that porch, smiling as if she'd won some game I never knew I was playing. It burns in my memory. Nights are the worst. I wake to the creak of a dock that isn't there, the hum of an engine on a lake miles away. I thought the cabin would save us. Instead, it destroyed everything I believed about love, about trust. Love without honesty is nothing but a performance, and betrayal staged in plain sight cuts deeper than any secret ever could. The truth is simple. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. No amount of escape, no quiet lake or sunset can fix what was broken long before. Sometimes the bravest choice isn't holding on. It's walking away and never looking back. I never thought of myself as the kind of guy who attracted trouble. I wasn't a star athlete, wasn't the life of the party, wasn't someone who turned heads when he walked into a room. I was just Aaron, 20 years old, junior in college, working nights at the rec center to pay off my meal plan. Most of my time went into juggling classes, shifts, and late-night study sessions. I liked my life simple. Maybe that's why when Chelsea first walked into it, I mistook intensity for passion. We met at a house party my roommate dragged me to. I wasn't planning to stay long, but then Chelsea found me leaning against the kitchen counter, nursing a warm beer. She was loud in the way that takes up all the air in the room, but when her attention landed on me, it felt like I was the only one there. We talked for hours, classes, music, childhood stories. By the end of the night, she said something I'll never forget. I think we're soulmates." I laughed, assuming it was the alcohol talking, but she didn't. She said it with complete conviction, eyes locked on mine like she already knew something I didn't. I should have taken it as a red flag, but instead, I felt flattered. For once, someone wasn't half interested, wasn't keeping their options open. Chelsea wanted me, and only me. The first couple weeks were fun. She'd leave notes in my backpack, show up with coffee before class, text me goodnight with heart emojis. It was overwhelming, sure, but after a string of casual flings, her devotion felt refreshing. My friends teased me about how fast it was, moving, but I brushed them off. What did they know about being chosen so completely? Then came the first crack. We were sitting on the quad one afternoon when a friend of mine, Jenny, walked by. We'd been friends since freshman year, nothing more. I waved her over and we chatted about a project we were both in. As soon as Jenny left, Chelsea turned to me with a look I didn't recognize. Her jaw was tight, her eyes narrow. "Who was that?" she asked. "Jenny. She's in my media class." "You didn't tell me you had female friends?" I laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't laugh back. "Chelsea, she's just a friend. Friends like that don't stay just friends. You'll see." It was the first time her devotion felt sharp, like it had an edge. I brushed it off, told myself she was just insecure, but deep down, something unsettled me. It didn't take long for Chelsea's insecurity to turn into control. A week after the Jenny incident, she started questioning every name that popped up on my phone. "Who's texting you at midnight?" she'd demand, leaning over my shoulder. If I said it was a classmate, she'd press classmate or crush. It became exhausting, like every normal interaction had to be justified. Then she started showing up places. At first it was kind of sweet. I'd finish my shift at the rec center, and she'd be waiting with a smile and a ride home. But then it turned into her sitting outside the building before my shift even ended, staring through the glass as I swiped IDs. When I told her she didn't have to wait, she said, "I like watching you. I feel close to you this way." The night that really scared me happened in my dorm. I came back from a late study session at the library, bone-tired, ready to crash. I unlocked my door, and the smell hit me first. Candles, waxy and sweet. My room glowed with flickering light. And there she was, Chelsea, sitting cross-legged on my bed, holding one of my t-shirts to her chest like it was a teddy bear. "What the hell are you doing in here?" I blurted. She smiled softly. "I missed you. I wanted to feel close." My pulse raced. "How? Did you even get in?" "Your roommate let me. Don't be mad. This is just love, Aaron. This is what it looks like when someone cares." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to throw her out right then, but another part, the part afraid of hurting her feelings, just stood frozen. I muttered something about being tired, and she finally blew out the candles and left. But that night, lying in the smoky air, I realized something was deeply wrong. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she just loved too much. Maybe she was scared of losing me. I told myself she'd calm down if I gave her reassurance, but reassurance became fuel. The more I tried to soothe her, the tighter she clung. One afternoon, walking across campus, I felt eyes on me. I turned, and there she was, half hidden behind a lamppost, phone raised. I froze. Later, scrolling through social media, I saw the photos, me mid-step, me laughing with a friend, me tying my shoe, captioned with things like "my forever" and "he doesn't know how much he needs me yet." I confronted her that night. "Chelsea, this has to stop. You can't just follow me around and post pictures without asking." Her face crumpled. "I just wanted to capture us, to show the world what we have." "What we have?" I snapped. "This isn't love. I don't even know what this is." Tears streamed down her face. She promised she'd change, begged me not to leave. I wanted to believe her, so I gave her another chance. The next day in class, I opened my backpack to grab a notebook, and there she was, crouched beside me, rifling through it like she had every right. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed. She looked up, wide-eyed. "I just wanted to see if you were hiding anything from me." That was it. My patience snapped. I told her we were done. No more chances. Breaking up with Chelsea wasn't clean. It wasn't a conversation that ended with tears and closure. It was a storm that only got worse. She called nonstop at first, 30, 40 times a day. When I blocked her, she made new numbers. When I ignored those, she showed up in person. Outside my dorm, outside the rec center, even outside the gym while I was on the treadmill. Every time I turned, she was there, watching. The messages got darker too. If I can't have you, no one will. We're meant to be forever, and you can't run from fate. I showed them to a friend who told me to go to campus security, but I hesitated. Part of me still didn't want to ruin her life. Another part thought maybe she'd eventually burn herself out. I moved dorms midway through the semester, hoping distance would solve what words couldn't. For a few weeks, it worked. I stopped seeing her face in every crowd, stopped dreading the sound of my phone buzzing. But just when I started to breathe again, the notes began, slipped under my new door, folded neatly, written in the same looping handwriting I knew too well. I'm still watching. You can't hide from love. Forever, Aaron. Every time I picked one up, a chill ran through me. She knew where I lived. Again. It's been months since the breakup, and I still live with the echo of her. I don't see her anymore, but I feel her. Every knock at my door makes me flinch. Every unfamiliar number on my phone makes my stomach knot. I've learned how obsession can masquerade as devotion, how quickly love can turn into surveillance. Friends tell me to move on, to let it go, but they don't understand. It's not about her anymore, it's about the shadow she left behind. It's about how easily trust can be broken when someone crosses the line between care and control. Sometimes, I walk across campus and swear I see her just at the edge of the crowd watching. Maybe it's my mind playing tricks, maybe it's her. I don't know which is worse. Love is only love when it's built on trust, respect, and freedom. When affection turns into control, when devotion demands ownership, it stops being love and becomes obsession. The hardest part isn't leaving someone like Chelsea. It's learning not to mistake intensity for intimacy ever again. True love doesn't trap you. It lets you breathe. I used to think houses could breathe. The first time we pulled into the cracked driveway of the duplex on Pine Street, I swear I heard it sigh, like it was tired of holding itself up. The siding was chipped, the porch rail leaned to one side, and the fence out back looked like a crooked set of teeth. I pressed my face to the car window, trying to imagine living there, but all I could think was that it felt smaller than the place we'd left behind. Home, sweet home, Mom said, trying too hard. She smiled at me in the rearview mirror, her lipstick faded from hours on the road. Dad didn't say anything. He just sat with his hands still on the wheel, staring at the duplex like it had insulted him. He'd been like that a lot since his plant started cutting shifts. When he did talk, his voice sounded heavier, like every word had a weight tied to it. I carried my box of books inside, the cardboard soft from the bottom where it had been dragged through the grass. The air smelled like dust and something damp. My room was half the size of the one I used to have. If I stood in the middle, I could touch both walls by spreading my arms. That night, I lay awake listening to the creaks of the house. Every time the wind rattled the loose siding, I thought, the whole place might collapse. I pressed my ear to the wall and could hear the faint sound of a TV from the other side of the duplex. Muffled voices drifting in and out. It felt strange knowing someone was right there, a few feet away, like sharing a house with strangers. Mom said Brookfield was going to be good for us, that people here looked out for each other. But when I peeked through the blinds, all I saw were houses that looked like ours, peeling paint, broken gutters, yards that hadn't seen a mower in weeks. It didn't look like a place people came to build things. It looked like a place people ended up when they had no choice. Still, I tried to believe her. The housewarming party was Mom's idea. She said it would help us put down roots, though I didn't think anyone wanted to plant roots in a place like this. Still, she baked 2 casseroles, bought plastic cups from the dollar store, and invited the neighbors. The living room filled with the smell of cheap beer and potato salad. Adults laughed louder than they needed to, like they were trying to convince themselves they were having fun. I sat on the stairs halfway up, listening. That's when I first heard his name. Raymond Keller, a man whispered, his voice thick, with beer. Used to be normal before the divorce. Now he's out there all hours digging in that garden of his like he's burying treasure. A woman snorted. Treasure? More like burying his past. My sister says she's seen him talking to himself, just standing there in the dirt. The group chuckled uneasily, but no one disagreed. Curiosity burned in me. I slipped upstairs and leaned out the small window on the landing. From there, I could just see over the fence to the yard next door. The hedges were taller than me, trimmed into rigid walls that hid everything but the tip of a greenhouse roof. A light glowed faintly inside, like a lantern trapped in fog. That night, when the house was quiet and my parents' voices faded into snores, I crept back to the window. The light in the greenhouse was still on. I thought I saw a shadow moving inside, but it was gone before I could be sure. I hugged my knees and told myself it was nothing. But the whispers from the party stayed with me, and the glow from that greenhouse kept flickering in my mind long after I crawled into bed. Days passed, but I couldn't stop watching. From the stairwell window, I learned Mr. Keller's habits. He came out every evening just as the sun dipped below the rooftops. He wore old clothes, baggy jeans, scuffed boots, a jacket that hung from his thin shoulders. He limped when he walked, dragging one leg slightly, but he moved with purpose. At first, all he did was garden, digging, watering, trimming. The hedges were his pride, cut sharp and even like walls. But then I noticed something strange. Some nights he dressed differently. No jeans or boots, he wore a suit pressed and clean, and his limp almost disappeared. He'd stand in front of the greenhouse door, head tilted, as if listening to someone inside. I pressed my forehead against the glass, straining to hear. One night, I finally caught fragments of his voice drifting through the still air. "Evelyn," he whispered. "I'm here. I've kept everything just the way you like it. They don't understand us, but you do." The hairs on my arms prickled. Evelyn. Was she his ex-wife? The one people at the party had whispered about? One evening, I couldn't stop myself. I slipped on sneakers, eased the back door open, and crossed the yard. The grass was damp and cold under my feet. The fence loomed ahead, its boards warped and splintered. I found a loose section near the corner and pushed until it gave way, just enough to squeeze through. The air smelled heavy inside his yard, thick with damp soil and something sweet, almost metallic. The greenhouse glowed ahead like a lantern, brighter up close. My heart pounded, but my feet kept moving. I pressed against the glass, shielding my eyes from the reflection. And that's when I saw her. At first, I thought it was a mannequin. A figure slumped in a chair, skin pale under the fluorescent lights. Then she moved, just barely, her chest rising in a shuddering gasp. My breath caught. She was alive. Her wrists were bound with chains to the chair's arms, the metal biting into her skin. Her hair hung in tangled clumps, her face gaunt and gray. She looked at me, or maybe through me, her lips moving without sound. Behind her, Mr. Keller paced, speaking softly. "Evelyn, don't be afraid. I've taken care of everything. You're safe here. They'll never take you from me again." My knees buckled, and I almost fell against the glass. I scrambled back, my sneakers slipping in the dirt. His head whipped toward the window, and for a moment I swore our eyes met. I ran. I tore through the fence gap, across the yard, and back into our duplex. My lungs burned as I bolted up the stairs and shook my parents awake. "Mom, Dad, you have to listen. There's a woman in the greenhouse. She's chained up. She's hurt." At first they thought I was dreaming, but the panic in my voice broke through. Dad grabbed his jacket and Mom called the police. I clung to her hand, shaking as sirens filled the night. When officers stormed the yard, I thought it was over. They'd find her, they'd save her. But when they came back, their faces were blank. "Nothing there," one said. "Greenhouse is empty. Empty." I wanted to scream. I knew what I saw. I knew she was real. They questioned me for hours, asking if I was sure, if maybe I'd imagined it. My parents tried to defend me, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. Maybe it was easier to believe I'd dreamed it than to admit a monster lived. Next door, Mr. Keller stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching as the police left. His expression was calm, almost smug. He waved to us like nothing had happened. We stayed another year in Brookfield, though nothing felt safe after that night. I stopped looking out the stairwell window. I stopped walking past his yard. But sometimes, late at night, I swore I could still smell the metallic sweetness of that greenhouse drifting through the cracks in our walls. When Dad finally got transferred, we packed up and left. Mom said it was for the best, and I agreed, but the memory came with me. Even now, years later, I see her face in dreams. The woman in the chair, eyes wide, lips gasping for air. And I wonder if she's still out there, hidden away in some other garden. Or if she was gone long before I ever saw her. Curiosity can uncover truths we aren't ready to face, but silence only lets darkness grow stronger. Evil often hides in plain sight behind hedges and polite smiles. And too often, people look away because it's easier. The lesson I learned is that when you see something wrong, you must speak, even if no one believes you. Because pretending not to see only feeds the monster next door. I used to believe relationships were supposed to feel safe. That's what my parents modeled for me. Dad worked long hours. Mom kept the house together. And even when they fought, you could tell there was love in the way they circled back to each other. When I met Harper, I thought I'd found a small piece of that same comfort. She was shy when we first met, almost painfully so. I'd seen her around campus coffee shops, always with her head bent over a book, hair hiding most of her face. One afternoon, I asked if she was reading Steinbeck, and she glanced up like a startled bird. We talked for 20 minutes, and by the time I left, I had her number. At first, her quietness was endearing. She texted me constantly, but I figured that was just excitement. Good morning, every day. Good night, every night, little check-ins between classes. It made me feel noticed, like I mattered. But once we made things official, the tone shifted. Her messages grew urgent. If I didn't respond within minutes, my phone would light up again. Where are you? Why? Aren't you answering? Who are you with? One night I was hanging out at my buddy Chris's place when Harper showed up at the door. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. You forgot to tell me where you'd be, she said, slipping past Chris like she belonged there. Chris shot me, a look half amused, half uncomfortable. I laughed it off, said she just worried too much. But something in her voice that night stuck with me. Something possessive, almost territorial. The night everything shifted from odd to unnerving happened a few weeks later. I'd picked up an extra shift at work, stocking shelves until nearly midnight. My apartment was dark when I got home, the air heavy with quiet. I flipped on the light and froze. Harper was sitting on my couch. No TV on, no music. Just sitting there staring at my phone on the coffee table. Harper. What the hell? She smiled faintly. You weren't answering. I got worried. My chest tightened. How did you get in? You left the window unlocked, she said casually, as if she were telling me I'd left the milk out. I walked over, picked up my phone. The screen was still open to my messages, but not the ones I'd been texting her. She'd scrolled through, conversations with friends, old group chats, even numbers I hadn't touched in months. That's private, I snapped. Her eyes filled instantly, tears welling up. I just needed to know. I love you, Dylan. Don't shut me out. The guilt hit me like a reflex, even though I knew I had no reason to feel guilty. I mumbled that it was fine, that I should have locked the window. But when she left that night, the silence of the apartment felt wrong, like she'd taken something with her. After that, I started noticing little things I couldn't explain. Harper would send texts like, "You look good in blue tonight," while I was out at the bar with friends. Or she'd mention a joke I'd told hours earlier to people she didn't know. Each time it was proof she'd been there, lurking just out of sight. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad, that maybe she was just insecure, maybe she'd settle down. But the scrapbook proved otherwise. It happened on a rainy afternoon. Harper had left her jacket at my place the night before, and when I brought it over to her apartment, she was out. The door was unlocked. I know I shouldn't have gone in, but I figured I'd just drop the jacket and leave. That's when I saw it. A binder on her desk, thick and heavy. with my name scrawled across the front in looping handwriting. I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside were pages filled with photographs. Me sleeping on my couch. Me walking to class. Me standing in line at the grocery store, none of them taken with my knowledge. Taped beside the photos were receipts, gas stations, diners, coffee shops I'd stopped at. Some had dates from months ago. The most chilling part were the cutout scraps of paper, pieces of names, girls I'd texted once or twice, some I barely remembered. Each one circled in red ink. I dropped the binder like it had burned me. My chest felt hollow. This wasn't insecurity. This was obsession. When I confronted her later, she didn't deny it. "I just wanted to keep track of us," she said, eyes blazing. "Don't you understand? You're mine." I tried to end it. I told her it was over, that I needed space, that I couldn't handle the way things had gotten. She didn't take it well. The night I broke up with her, she showed up at my parents' house. I was inside trying to explain everything to Mom when we heard the pounding on the door. "Dylan!" Harper's voice shrieked through the wood. "You can't leave me. You promised." My mom pulled me back, but Harper kept banging, her voice cracking with rage and desperation. Neighbors peeked out their windows as she screamed, "You're mine, Dylan. You'll always be mine." She stayed for hours. My dad finally threatened to call the police, and only then did she storm off, her face twisted with something I can only describe as hate. That night I packed a bag. Within a week I transferred my job, broke my lease, and moved 2 cities away. It felt like running, but I didn't care. I just wanted air. I just wanted to sleep without wondering if she was outside my window. Moving helped, but it didn't erase her. Every so often an unmarked package would arrive at my door. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I knew too well. Inside there was always something small but sharp with meaning. A photo of me walking home from work, a napkin from a diner I'd eaten at, a pressed flower I'd once given her, years ago. I never responded. I never told anyone. I threw the packages away and tried to pretend they didn't exist. But the truth is, they reminded me she hadn't really let go. Maybe she never would. I live differently now. I lock every window, double-check every door. I don't share details online, don't mention where I'm going or who I'm with. Some days I almost forget. But then the mail comes, and my stomach knots. I don't know if Harper will ever stop watching me. What I do know is that love should never feel like being hunted. Obsession disguised as love is one of the most dangerous lies you can believe. Real love doesn't demand control, doesn't invade your privacy, and doesn't leave you afraid. If someone crosses the line between care and possession, you owe it to yourself to walk away, no matter how hard it feels. Because holding on to someone who won't respect your freedom isn't love at all. It's a cage. If you'd asked me a year before, I would have laughed at the idea of taking a live-in aide job in some manicured gated condo community. But life has a way of twisting your plans. I was 27, between jobs, tired of scraping by on temporary work that never covered more than rent and ramen. When I saw the listing, home health aide needed, live-in room and board provided, I clicked without thinking twice. The interview was with Kale's mother, Marla. She was a woman in her 50s with neat blonde hair and sharp, restless eyes. The condo smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, the kind of spotless that spoke to both pride and exhaustion. "Kale needs structure," she told me, folding her hands. "He's 21, on the spectrum, sensory issues, borderline personality traits. He's had problems with substances. Your job is to help him stay on track. Cleaning, meals, making sure he takes his medication, and most importantly, keeping the wrong people out." She leaned forward. "There's one in particular. Her name is Soraya Crail. She's 38, lives downstairs. She's not allowed in this unit. Ever. Do you understand?" I nodded, though her intensity made me nervous. When I met Kale, I didn't know what to expect. He was tall, skinny, messy black hair falling into his eyes. He avoided my gaze at first, but then surprised me with a blunt, almost childlike, "Do you like movies?" That was the start. He was sweet in ways that snuck up on you. leaving me little notes about groceries he wanted, humming when he thought no one was listening. But he was unpredictable too, shifting moods like weather. Some days he'd pace the condo, talking fast, insisting he needed to drive somewhere at midnight. Other days he'd sit in silence, staring at his hands. I found myself protective of him, maybe too quickly. There was something fragile about Kale, like one wrong influence could unravel the delicate balance Marla had tried to build. And then, one afternoon, I saw her. Through the blinds, down by the mailboxes, a woman stood smoking, her hair stringy, makeup smudged, body jittering like she was running on fumes. She caught me looking and smiled, wide, knowing. That had to be Soraya. It didn't take long for Soraya to make herself known. The first knock came on a Tuesday evening, around 9. Kale was out with a day program, and I was folding laundry. In the living room, the pounding startled me. It was sharp, insistent. I opened the door just a crack. "Hey, sweetie," she said, leaning against the frame. Up close, she looked even worse. Eyes red, lips cracked, skin sallow. "Kale home?" "No," I said firmly. She sniffed, glanced past me into the condo. "Tell him I need to talk, just 5 minutes." "I'll pass along the message," I replied, shutting the door. That was the start of a pattern. She'd linger outside, pretending to check her mail, smoking with exaggerated exhales. She'd wave at me like we were neighbors swapping pleasantries, but there was always that sharpness in her eyes, that edge of calculation. When I told Kale about her, he shrugged. "She's cool. She understands me." "She's not allowed in here," I reminded him. He frowned. "You sound like my mom." That stung more than I expected. I didn't want to control him. I just didn't trust her. Weeks passed. Kale had good days and bad. On the good ones, we'd make grilled cheese and watch old movies, his laughter genuine, light. On the bad ones, he'd retreat into himself, muttering about how nobody cared. I worried that Soraya fed those thoughts, that she whispered in his ear whenever I wasn't around. One night I caught him sneaking toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Nowhere." Was it her? He didn't answer, just pulled his hoodie tighter around his shoulders. I felt like I was losing ground, like the fragile trust between us was slipping through my fingers. The worst night came in November. Kale was at a late group activity, and I was alone in the condo. Around midnight, the pounding started again, this time louder, frantic, rattling the frame. I froze, heart racing. "Open up!" Soraya's voice cut through the door. "I know he's in there." I swallowed hard and called back. "He's not home. You need to leave." She slammed her fists again. "Don't lie to me. You think you can keep him from me? He needs me." I gripped my phone, ready to dial 911, but my hands were shaking too badly. "Get out here," she screamed. "You think you're better than me? You're just a babysitter. He loves me." The sound of her rage filled the hallway, echoing off the walls. Then came a crash, a fist against the door so hard the wood splintered. "Go home." "Soraya!" I yelled, my voice cracking. For a moment, silence. Then her laugh, low and sharp, before footsteps retreated down the stairs. I stood there for a long time, every muscle trembling. When Kale returned later, I told him what happened. He looked small, ashamed. "She just wants help," he muttered. "She's dangerous, Kale. She's going to drag you down." He wouldn't look at me. "You don't understand her." I realized then how deep her hooks were. The next day, I called my friend Nolan. He'd always been the level-headed one, the kind of guy who could talk me down when my thoughts spiraled. He agreed to come over. We sat on the couch, mugs of coffee between us, while I recounted the night before. "You need to call the police," Nolan said. "They won't do anything," I sighed. "It's just her word against mine." He shook his head. "You can't wait until it's worse." As if on cue, another knock rattled the door, lighter this time, almost mocking. Nolan and I exchanged a look. I edged to the peephole. Soraya stood there, cigarette dangling, smirk on her face. "I know he's in there," she crooned. Nolan whispered, "Don't answer." We stayed silent. After a minute, she leaned closer to the door. "You think you can keep me out forever? He'll come back to me. You'll see." Her footsteps faded, but the silence she left behind felt heavier than the noise. Nolan rubbed his forehead. She's unhinged. You have to protect yourself. And him. I nodded, but my stomach twisted. Cale didn't see her as dangerous. He saw her as the only person who didn't treat him like a patient. And that's what scared me most. Life in Silver Pine Ridge changed after that. Every creak of the stairwell, every shadow outside the blinds set me on edge. I started sleeping with my phone beside me, the number for security already typed in. Cale and I grew closer in some ways. He trusted me enough to share stories about his past, the drugs, the nights he didn't remember. But whenever I brought up Soraya, he shut down. It was like she had carved out a corner of his mind where I wasn't allowed. Marla called often, her voice sharp with worry. Don't let her in, she reminded me. Not even once, she'll ruin everything. I promised I wouldn't, but promises felt fragile in that condo, with the thin walls and the locked door that shook under Soraya's fists. The last time I saw her, she was leaning against the fence, cigarette glowing, watching me through the smoke. She didn't smile this time. She just mouthed words I couldn't quite catch, but the meaning was clear. This wasn't over. I don't know how long I'll last here. Maybe tomorrow will be quiet. Maybe not. But every night when I lock the door, I brace myself. Because peace in Silver Pine Ridge feels like glass, clear, fragile, always on the edge of breaking. Sometimes danger doesn't come crashing in all at once. It seeps through cracks, disguised as friendship, sympathy, or love. Protecting someone fragile means drawing boundaries, even when they resist. It's not cruel to keep out what can destroy them. The hardest part of caring for others is realizing that not every battle can be fought with kindness alone. Sometimes safety means saying no and meaning it.